There was a category of crops quietly carrying families through World War II that, well, almost no one talks about today. These weren't high-yield commercial crops or seasonal vegetables that needed constant replanting. These were what many families came to rely on as forever vegetables. Plants that, once established, kept producing year after year with very little input. In a time when seeds were scarce, labour was stretched thin and supply lines could collapse overnight, these crops, honestly, offered something far more valuable than just abundance. They offered continuity. A planted bed didn't just mean food for one season. It meant food for years, sometimes even decades. That kind of reliability is, I'd say, hard to overstate when everything else is uncertain. What's striking is that these crops didn't disappear because they stopped working. They faded out because the systems around them changed. Understanding what made them so effective and why they were abandoned reveals a lot about how food systems shifted and, what may have been lost in the process. These long-living vegetables remove the need for constant replanting. One of the biggest advantages of these crops was that they didn't need to be planted every year. Once established, they returned season after season without requiring seeds or major effort. Plants like perennial greens, certain root vegetables, and hardy herbs could remain productive for years. This reduced dependency on external inputs at a time when seeds weren't always available. If you apply this today, consider dedicating part of your garden to perennial crops. Even a small section can provide a steady food source with minimal maintenance. They thrived in poor soil and harsh conditions when other crops failed. During the war, soil quality often declined due to overuse and lack of fertilizers. Many annual crops struggled under these conditions. Perennial vegetables, however, were more resilient. Their established root systems allowed them to survive in less than ideal environments and still produce usable food. You can use this principle by selecting crops that are known for their resilience rather than focusing only on high-yield varieties that require perfect conditions. They provided consistent yields without heavy labour demands. Labour shortages were common during World War II, especially in rural areas. Families needed crops that didn't require constant attention. Once planted, these vegetables required less work than annual crops. There was no need for repeated planting, and maintenance was minimal compared to more demanding varieties. If time or labour is limited, perennial crops can help reduce workload while still providing food. They extended the growing season naturally. Many of these plants produce food earlier in the season and continued later into colder months. This extended availability made them especially valuable. Instead of relying on a single harvest window, families could gather food over a longer period. This reduced pressure on storage and ensured a more consistent supply. You can apply this by combining perennial crops with seasonal ones to create a more balanced and continuous harvest cycle. They contributed to soil stability and long-term productivity. Perennial plants play a different role in the soil compared to annual crops. Their roots remain in place year-round, helping to prevent erosion and improve soil structure. This created a more stable growing environment over time. While annual crops often depleted soil, these long-living vegetables helped maintain it. You can improve your soil by incorporating crops that support long-term health rather than focusing only on short-term yield. they required fewer external inputs to remain productive. During the war, access to fertilizers and other inputs was limited. Crops that depended heavily on these resources became difficult to sustain. Perennial vegetables, by contrast, were more self-sufficient. Once established, they required less intervention to keep producing. This made them especially valuable in low-resource environments. Today, they can serve the same purpose for anyone looking to reduce dependency on external supplies. They were often overlooked because, well, they didn't fit industrial farming models. After the war, agriculture shifted towards systems that prioritized uniformity, scalability, and mechanization. Annual crops fit this model more easily. Perennial vegetables, with their varied growth patterns and longer timelines, didn't align as well with industrial practices. As a result, they were gradually pushed aside. Now, this wasn't because they were ineffective, it was because they didn't match the priorities of large-scale production. They required patience, which, modern systems tend to avoid. Establishing these crops often took quite a bit of time. They didn't always produce significant yields in the first year, but once established, they became highly reliable. Modern systems, however, tend to prioritize quick returns over long-term stability. If you're willing to invest time up front, these crops can provide lasting benefits that annual systems simply can't match. They still offer practical value for modern food resilience. Reintroducing these vegetables doesn't require a complete overhaul of your garden. You can start small. Just choose 1 or 2 perennial crops suited to your climate. Prepare the soil, plant carefully, and allow a bit of time for them to establish. Once they do, you'll have a food source that continues to produce with minimal effort. Over time, this can become a stable foundation within your overall food system. These forgotten crops represent a different approach to food security. What made these forever vegetables so effective wasn't just their longevity, it was the mindset behind them. They were chosen for reliability, resilience, and long-term value. They reduced dependency, stabilized food supply, and required fewer resources to maintain. Those qualities are just as relevant today as they were during the Second World War. The real question is not why they worked, but why we stopped using them. These crops didn't disappear because they failed. They disappeared because priorities changed. Efficiency replaced resilience. Short-term yield replaced long-term stability. And in that shift, something valuable was left behind. If you found this useful, please subscribe for more deep dives into Second World War survival strategies, forgotten crops, and practical knowledge that still holds value today. Share this with someone who understands that real food security isn't about abundance. It's about consistency over time.